Hello, this is Mr. Chabry, and we are here with another narrated Pokemon battle. So this is going to be an underused battle, and my opponent is going to be Gamer MZ. So looking at my opponent's team, the things that scare me is mainly the Mega Aerodactyl. Also Arcanine's a big threat, and Volcanion looks like it could be a pretty big threat too. But I'm actually going to lead off with my Caesar, as my opponent actually leads off with the one thing that will scare my Caesar away. And that is this Arcanine. So I do not want to stay in. I need to keep Caesar alive, especially for that Mega Aerodactyl. It's really my best bet for that. So I'm going to go into my Seismitoed, and Seismitoed's a really good bulky Pokemon. It's a Pokemon people seem to sleep on, I guess, but it's actually really good. So it takes that very well. So now we are in here, and Arcanine's not going to stay in. And my opponent's actually going to go into Volcanion, expecting a Scald maybe, as I do go for a Scald. I could have went for a ground type move, but I felt like it would make more sense going for Scald, because that way if Aerodactyl tried to switch in, we would hit it. But thinking about it, my opponent probably wouldn't bring Aerodactyl in on my Seismitoed. But here, I'm going to switch out into my Darmanitan. I know for a fact that my opponent probably won't go for the Steam Eruption, and this is my Scarfed Darmanitan, so it can come in pretty nicely. And my opponent's actually going to switch out now and go into Lassie, the Arcanine, to get that Intimidate on my physical attacker. I'm actually going to go for a Rock Slide. I feel like this is the best neutral option, because if I went Earthquake, Aerodactyl could come in and be a big problem. But I'm going Rock Slide, and that would have done some okay damage. If this is a bulky Arcanine, it probably wouldn't have done that much, especially with that Intimidate. But unfortunately, we're going to miss, and I'm going to have to switch into my Seismitoed again. I need to keep Darmanitan a little bit longer because it is actually pretty good, especially against this Klefki, which just switched in as I switched out my Darmanitan. So I'm going to go for Earthquake. I need to do some damage to this thing before it sets up the screens. It's going to go ahead and start setting up some spikes, and luckily for me, it actually does over half, so that means this is going to be a 2-hit KO, and if we can take care of this thing, that's going to be really nice for me. So my opponent this time is actually going to go for a Reflect. That way it won't take as much damage from Earthquake, and I'm actually going to switch it up and go for a Scald this time, because I was hoping that would actually do okay damage, especially with the Reflect up, but unfortunately it doesn't quite take it out, and my opponent's going to get both Reflect and Light Screen. But yeah, I also switched it up just to make sure that my opponent doesn't switch into the Aerodactyl, and here I'm going to set up Stealth Rocks, just in case my opponent decides to bring in Volcanion. It might not have been the best idea, mainly because my opponent has 2 layers of spikes now. But one of the reasons why I went for Stealth Rocks is because my opponent has quite a few Pokemon that are actually weak to Stealth Rocks. So if my opponent does have something with Defog, I was hoping that maybe that would incentivize my opponent for going for Defog, and that would get rid of the spikes on my side too. So now my opponent's going to bring in the Volcanion, and I'm not totally sure what Volcanion wants to do to my Seismitoed. It's going to go for Earth Power. Seismitoed takes that pretty well. I'm going to Toxic, that way I can start whittling it down. I don't know if this is like a physically bulky set or especially bulky, but yeah, we're going to go ahead, poison that thing. That would have been just in case my opponent was baiting me maybe to go for a ground type move. I would have been able to Toxic something, but now my opponent's going to switch it up and go for a Sludge Bomb, probably expecting me to switch into Celebi maybe, but I'm going to actually stay in because I know Volcanion can't really do much to my Seismitoed, and one-on-one Seismitoed will win. Maybe my opponent was actually wanting to get a Poison too, so that would affect like a switch into Celebi, and if I stayed in, it might have poisoned me. But now my opponent's going to go back to the Earth Power, mainly hoping probably for a special defense drop. I'm going to actually go Toxic again, predicting a switch. I thought maybe my opponent wouldn't want to lose Volcanion here, because Volcanion is pretty good. But now I'm going to switch myself because it's pretty clear that this thing will go down. And I'm going to go into Celebi expecting the Earth Power, as my opponent switches it up one last time and goes for Flamethrower. So unfortunately, my opponent trying really hard to predict that Celebi, and it ends up paying off for my opponent on that last turn. I was actually expecting maybe an Earth Power to finish off Seismitoed, because if I stayed in, there's no way Seismitoed would have went down to that. But unfortunately, the Pokemon I brought in was unable to handle that Flamethrower. So now I'm going to go into my Mega Pidgeot. I'm going to go ahead and Mega Evolve. I don't know what set this Heracross is. I've seen quite a few gut sets actually, but yeah, I don't know exactly what this set is, but it's actually going to go for a Stone Edge, showing me that it is Scarfed. And I probably should have thought about that. It's going to get a no guard Stone Edge, so it's going to hit me every time. But luckily, Mega Pidgeot does have enough bulk to survive that, and we're going to finish it off with a Hurricane. So that's really nice. And a good thing is my opponent's Reflect is now gone, so that's going to make it a little bit easier for my Scizor once it comes in to finish off this Mega Aerodactyl. So now what I'm going to do, I think Mega Pidgeot is still pretty good Pokemon, even though it's only 12 HP left. It's immune to the spikes, so I can bring it in and outspeed certain things that I need to. So I'm actually going to sack off my Darmanitan here. Darmanitan doesn't really do much for me anymore. Even if my opponent didn't go for Crunch, it probably would have died to the poison anyway, and that also is a good thing because that means the light screen is also gone. So unfortunately we had to sack off a Pokemon, but that just means we've got Scizor in here. So now we're getting to the end of the game where we're trying to play for the end game here, and my opponent's going to go into Arcanine to get that Intimidate, and there's not much Scizor can even do to Arcanine. The good thing is I've got Stealth Rocks up, so that's going to slowly whittle down any switch-ins my opponent makes. Unfortunately, we have spikes on our side, but I think the Stealth Rocks are going to do more for us, and I'm actually going to have to switch out. I can't stay in on this Arcanine, not with my Scizor, not with Mega Aerodactyl still alive. So unfortunately, I'm going to go into my Pidgeot. Looking at it, I think Pidgeot's probably the best thing to let go, and that way I can bring in Seismitoed here. And I'm actually only bringing it in because I think my opponent is banded. That's the main reason, and honestly, I'm going to let Seismitoed take one for the team so we can lower this thing's defense and special defense a little bit more, just in case it's a little bulkier. So that way Crocodile can come in, and Crocodile will outspeed this thing. We know, though I'm pretty sure this is a banded set, so that's why we're going to go into the Crook here, and also Crocodile is Scarfed. So we're going to go ahead and knock off to finish this thing off, and that will be a knock off Arcanine, and yes, it did have the ban. So now my opponent brings in the Raikou, and we're getting close to the end game, so we're going to have to figure out how to take care of Raikou and the Mega Aerodactyl with the last two Pokemon I have. And looking at my opponent's team, the best thing probably would be to finish off this Raikou, or bring it down low enough that Scizor can finish it off with maybe a Bullet Punch. And that way I can, finish the game with just bullet punching everything. But my opponent's actually going to switch out this turn, probably seeing if I'm Scarfed or not. I'm Scarfed, so I'm locked into knockoff. But the good thing about that is that means Crocodile is still alive, so it can handle that Raikou in the back. And I'm going to go into my Scizor. Scizor does have enough bulk to take this Iron Head. And yeah, all we have to do is Bullet Punch, really, and we will finish off this Aerodactyl. And then there's nothing that the Raikou can really do to the Crocodile. Of course, it can hit and power Ice, but we are Scarfed, and we have Earthquake. So yeah, we're going to be able to finish off this Raikou with an Earthquake once we get to that. And since this Raikou didn't get an item knocked off, maybe it was a Z move user, I'm going to finish Scizor's turn with a Bullet Punch just to chip it a little bit more. There's not really a reason not to hit Bullet Punch. I don't want to switch in or anything. We're going to have to let Scizor go down, and my opponent does reveal that it is a Z move user Raikou, and it's going to go for the Gigavolt Havoc. So most of the time I notice Raikou's carrying the never-ending nightmare to check certain things. But yeah, I guess this is a really good set if you can hit it on something really hard, because Raikou does have really good special attack and stab. Gigavolt Havoc does a lot of damage, but now I can easily go into Crook. Crook will live the spikes, and the Intimidate doesn't matter as a special attacker, but an Earthquake will be enough to finish off this Raikou. So this was a really close battle there. It got really close at the end, and it was really down 2-2, and whoever had the best predictions made the actual win here. And unfortunately for my opponent, he probably thought maybe I wasn't Scarfed, and maybe I would switch it up with an Earthquake. But yeah, we ended up winning that one, and it was a really close battle. So if you like this, give it a thumbs up, subscribe. I will see you in the next Pokemon video.